So, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Peter Stern. I live in Pennsylvania for almost a year. Before that, I used to live in Connecticut, and before that, New York and other places. But the reason for this interview is because I came from Germany and survived the concentration camps. I don't know if a child can say things aren't what they should be, but I know one of the people that lived in the house that we lived in, she kept wondering about what was going to happen to us, although I'm not too sure I knew what that meant. Certainly the fact that we had to sort of walk in the gutters, or at least I remember once having to do that, seemed strange, but I certainly knew a war was going on because I remember one day a man came and cut down the iron fencing that was in front of the house, as he did along the whole street, I assume. And I was intrigued with the welding torch. And certainly I knew that metal was going to be used for the war effort. We were sent to the ghetto in Riga, and there my father worked with some of his students at fixing German army vehicles, and my mother worked in a building separating the clothing of, and this was the clothing that had been confiscated from the people who had been executed. After a while being in Riga, we were then shipped to Russia, where he continued working on the cars until the Germans started to lose the war. At that point, his assistants, the boys, were sent back to the ghetto, about half of which survived. We were sent to the civil prison and stayed there for about 3 months. We were then smuggled by the German army back into Germany, and we were smuggled underneath clothing, again, from people that had been executed, and was being sent back to Germany, and were then surrendered to civil authorities, where we were put. I remember being in a courtroom and the judge yelling, and my father asking for permission to hug us, which he did, and then we never saw him again. He went to Buchenwald, where he died, and my mother, brother, and I went to Ravensbrück. And then we were shipped to Bergen-Belsen. At this point, my mother no longer, I don't think she had to go to work anymore. I think that was strictly incarceration and essentially waiting to die. Bergen-Belsen was a very, very hellish place, even though I know we were not in the worst part of it. It was both a men's and women's prison. At the point that we got there, food and water were an occasional thing. People were dying all the time. And it was finally over.
Have you seen any change in the responses that the students have to your story over this decade and a half?
some of the older kids occasionally will draw parallels to what's happening in the world around them.
You spoke about, when we spoke yesterday, about, again, drawing a comparison to the persecution of the Jews in the Holocaust to the experience of Black Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Well, the essence is that a group of people have been relegated to be the lesser portion of whatever society they are in. It's an ongoing thing, so.
Immediately following the Civil War, government troops were sent to the demolished South to protect the recently freed populations of people and begin rebuilding. They were soon thereafter withdrawn as a result of the White House bowing to public pressure. Without the buffer of the military, the legacy of violence against Black people in America began again. In the wake of the radical Reconstruction, you get organized groups, such as the Ku Klux Klan, the White League in Louisiana, the Knights of the White Camellia, whose purpose is to obstruct and destroy Reconstruction, to assassinate or intimidate Black and white Republican officials, and to use violence to prevent people from becoming independent contributors to the economy and community. The KKK would take people out of their houses in the dark of the night, strip them out in the road, and perform sadistic torture on these people. Legislation began to be passed, such as the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson, that paralleled later legislation in Nazi Germany. The red flags were all there. Both of these periods in history resulted from man's need to dehumanize others, but these events did not end in history. On February 26, 2012, 17-year-old Trayvon Martin was fatally shot by 28-year-old Community Watch coordinator George Zimmerman in Sanford, Florida. On August 9, 2014, 18-year-old Michael Brown was fatally shot by 28-year-old police officer Darren Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri. On January 10, 2015, 4 French Jews were shot while shopping in a kosher deli in France. Army and police security now guard all Jewish-affiliated sites across Western Europe.
You can find a million differences between one genocide and the other. The importance is the similarity, and that similarity is the disregard for the humanity for whoever is being persecuted.
You go to a variety of schools and speak to children about your experience. Why do you do that?
I have been a teacher for close to 30 years, and I feel teaching is one of the few ways that an individual has of changing something of our society. It may only be one child at a time. The fact that my survival is so dramatic is at the very least a teaching tool to help people, and kids in particular, to think about their role in society. But essentially what I want them to get to is the statement, essentially, never again, which I really don't believe, but I believe it on a micro level, that each kid could make a difference on their level and think about society. The response is essentially always the same because I don't stop until I get it, which is to say, you have to participate and try to not pick on that person who might be different than you, and to help that person if that person is being picked on. And it can be very much on a micro scale, one individual for the other, or, as I point out, as you get older, start finding a cause and work for it. That question being asked of me, I am vocal, and I go to schools and ask questions.
Come out while the rain is gone. Slow down, breathing on your own, and the world keeps spinning around while we're diving in. And the world is bringing us down, leaving marks on our skin.